All right, hello everybody. My name is Nee, and today we're going over the expense tracker project for refactoring with Redux Toolkit. In this project, we're refactoring an expense tracking application. This app helps users budget their money and visualize where their funds are going. We'll be using what we learned so far about Redux Toolkit to simplify our code and see how Redux Toolkit can aid in constructing an application. Specifically, we'll be using create_slice to automatically generate reducers and actions. Let's get started. So here we have our workspace, and for the purposes of our refactor, the expense tracking application actually already works. We can take a peek at its functionality before we start refactoring it, which is a great habit to have so that we fully understand what we're fixing and that we do not accidentally remove any features. This tracking application allows us to set an amount for any category, and then when we add in a transaction, we can attribute it to a category and see that it subtracts from kind of the fund category overall and show us the new remaining fund. So let's go ahead and give that a go. Let's say I'm somebody who has $1,000 in housing for the month, and then my new transaction, let's say I rented a cabin or something for cabin in the wood for the weekend, and it costed me about $300. And the category, I'll just keep it to housing because that's the one I set right here. And if I do an add transaction, I should see that the funds remaining goes from 1,000 to back down to 700. And if I scroll down, I should see that transaction documented down here where it has the amount, the category, and the description that I chose for it. Cool, I feel like now we see how that works. Let's go ahead and get started on task 1. So let's scroll down here and take a look at task number 1. In this first part, we'll take out the manual action creators and reducers and use Redux Toolkit's create_slice instead. But in task 1, we just need to import create_slice before we can use it. So at the top of budget_slice.js, let's make some room right here. And I'm going to import create_slice from the Redux Toolkit. All right, so that's really all we need to do for task 1, so I'll check it off. Now that we have it imported, in task 2, we can begin to define our slice. Remember that using create_slice, you need to give it the initial state, an object of reducer functions, and a slice name. So in the midst of all of this code, I'm just gonna kind of plant myself at the bottom here, and we'll get started writing some of the code first, and then we'll clean up and delete afterwards. So right now we will give the slice, we'll call it budget slice or budgets slice. Make sure you don't forget the S there. And then we'll initialize a call to create_slice. Give it the empty object. Okay, so we first need to give it a slice name with the name property. We'll call it budgets. We also need to give it an initial state property and assign it to the predefined initial state value that we already have. And that is right here. That was already predefined for us, so we didn't need to do that. So for now, we'll use that. We'll reuse it. Do initial state. All right, last we need to give it a reducer property. For now, we'll just set it to an empty object, and we'll work on filling it in the next few tasks. Cool. Make sure that you double check the spelling. Everything looks like it's in order. Budget slice with create_slice, and then we gave it the 3 properties that it needs. I'll go ahead and check off task 2 now. All right, let's scoot down to task number 3. In task number 3, we want to refactor our edit budget action creator so that it's defined within the reducers property of our slice. So that's the action creator right here that was manually written. We also want to change the code a little bit so that it directly updates the state, which is more aligned with the philosophy of Redux Toolkit. So here is the current logic that's handling the edit budget action. It's basically doing it immutably by iterating over the state array and returning a new array where the budget might be modified. We don't want to create a new array. Since we have immer that will help our state be updated immutably behind the scenes, we want to make it easier to read and just update it directly instead of our new reducers. So in here, we will do edit budget, which is the name of the action creator, and then we'll put in a function that takes a state and an action. Okay. And then in the next few steps, we're going to update the state mutably by just go ahead and looking for the category inside of the state, finding the matching one, and then updating the budget. So first we'll destructure and we'll get category and amount from the action.payload. And then we're gonna use state.find to kind of just iterate over it and look for what we need. Category equals category. And if we find it, we will go ahead and update it to the new amount. Okay, so this is the action creator. We just put it inside of the reducer. So this is moved into just this. And this whole chunk of code is this part right here. We've changed the logic, but it essentially does the same thing. It will update the amount of funds. So for now, we'll check off task 3. All right. Now that we created the budget slice, we can actually just go ahead and clean up our old exports and everything else. So let's get rid of this action creator. We also don't need budgets reducer either. And since we got rid of budgets reducer, we're going to get rid of this. All right, and then now we need to make the necessary exports. So we can export the edit budget action creator generated by create slice. So we'll do export const. We'll just deconstruct it. Equals budgets slice.action. All right, and then we also want to export the reducer generated by create slice. So we'll just do a default export for that. Dot reducer. Let's double check that we cleaned up everything. We only have our slice and then our 2 new exports. That looks good. Let's check off task 4. We're making pretty good stride here that we can move on to the next task group, which deals with the transaction slice. So in this next task group, we're going to do the same thing we did previously with budget slice and refactor the transaction slice. Let's open up that file, so transactionslice.js. The transaction slice is responsible for storing all of the user's transactions. We'll condense the reducer, and so that's like all of this stuff right here. That's a lot of stuff. And the action creators into a slice with create slice. So as always, we need to start by importing create slice from the toolkit. So let's make some space for ourselves up here, and we'll do import. I'll destructure it to get create slice from Redux JS/toolkit. Perfect. We can check off task 5. Okay, on to task number 6. We want to start defining our slice in task number 6. Remember that create slice accepts an initial state, an object of reducer functions, and a slice name. We'll call it transaction slice, so don't forget the S right here, because there's 2 S's next to each other. And we'll initialize it with a call to create slice, and we'll pass it the empty object. And then we can give it a name with the name property. We'll call it transactions. Then we need to give it an initial state. We already have an initial state defined to us right here, just like we did in budget slice. So all we gotta do is put the name in there. Initial state, not slice. And then for reducers, back to the empty object for now. We'll define the rest of that later. Let's see, double checking everything. Looks good, checks out. Let's check off task 6. Okay, now we move on to task number 7. So in this file, there are 2 action creators. We have add transaction right here and delete transaction right here. And the logic of both of these are housed inside of the transaction reducer. So for this task, we're going to kind of consolidate the action creator and its logic all inside of the reducers property. So we'll start with add transaction by adding a add transaction property to the reducers object. And then we'll set it equal to a function that takes in the state and an action. Okay, we'll also update the logic to update the state mutably, so we're not going to do it exactly like this. The result will be the same, but it'll be a lot more readable. So we're going to extract the category of that action.payload, and then we're going to push the new transaction into an array associated with that category, and this will update the state object. So we'll do this. Category.push action.payload. Cool, so that should take care of the add transaction action, a lot of actions. And you can see that this is only 2 lines of code compared to this. So it's a lot more readable. And it's using immer, it's updating it immutably. And then next we'll do delete transaction, which will also take a function that takes in a state and an action object. And then inside, we'll use the filter method to update the state by removing the transaction via its ID from the array of transaction based on the category given. So that was quite a mouthful. I'm going to go ahead and type it out, and then we could talk about it in a little bit. So we're going to extract the category and the ID. We're going to set it equal to action.payload, so we're going to grab it from there. And then we're going to do this. We'll use the filter method to basically take out that transaction via its ID. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. The state category accesses the list of transaction for the given category. The filter method creates an array with all elements that pass the provided function. In this case, the function is checking the ID of each transaction that is not equal to the provided ID from the payload, and any transaction with the matching ID will not be included in the array, and then we just save it back into here and update the state. That looks good. Let's go ahead and check off task number 7. All right, we're in the home stretch. Let's go down to task number 8. So now that we've implemented our transaction slice, we can go ahead and start cleaning up. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the manual action creators right here. We will also get rid of this reducer since we don't need it anymore. Awesome, and then we will delete this export default transaction reducer since we actually don't have it anymore. Now we need to export the action and the reducer generated by transaction slice. So here we'll do export const add transaction, delete transaction, and we'll destructure it from transactions slice.actions, and then we'll also export the reducer. Oop, don't forget your S. And that's going to be a default export. So let's go ahead and hit save and see that this re-renders. Good, okay. So let's give it a go and test to see that it works. I'll set 500 for housing this time. And then I'll say $250 this time. Good, that took away from that, $250. Let's see if we can delete that. And it restores back to 500. Cool. So it looks like our add transaction and our delete transaction is currently working. Let's try one more time. Let's say for clothing, I'll set a $100 budget, and I got some new shoes that cost me $75 at transaction. Now I have $25 left. Oh, just kidding. I returned the shoes. Now I have $100 again. Awesome. It looks like our code is working. We've successfully managed to refactor budget slice and transaction slice. Let's check off task number 8. So congrats on making it to the end. After completing the project, you gained a valuable experience in refactoring Redux code to use more streamlined and efficient create slice approach provided by the Redux Toolkit. You're getting more proficient at simplifying Redux logic, reducing boilerplate code, and consequently enhancing code maintainability. So as always, go forth and apply what you learned here today, and happy coding!